Okay, so today I want to talk with you guys about System Shock 3. Because it's back, baby, but not in the way a lot of people expected. Because instead of the small indie studio Other Side rising from the ashes to take back the reins on their game, a new challenger has emerged. And that challenger is named Tencent. So before we get into that though, let's give a little background on what System Shock even is and why this new acquisition is causing such a rift in the community and the new game coming out. For those of you that don't know, System Shock 1, the original game in the series, came out in 1994, around the time baby FranklyGaming was just getting started, and it released to a ton of really good reviews and acclaim. The game was about a nameless hacker caught infiltrating a space station. He is offered a plea on the crimes he has committed as long as he hacks Shodan, one of the artificial intelligences controlling the space station he is currently trying to hack into. The game is widely regarded as one of the best in the action-adventure series of all time, and at the time, it was a huge breakthrough for gaming, as it pushed the action-adventure genre into new spaces it hadn't seen before, with insane emergent gameplay and giving the player agency that was only seen again in the Deus Ex series. Nowadays, a lot of current games, like Dishonored, Prey, and Bioshock, heavily stem from the groundwork that was laid by System Shock back in the early 90s. To cut to the chase though, System Shock 2 was released in 1999 and was once again widely acclaimed by both fans and critics, and was another awesome entry into the series. But since then, the System Shock series has remained relatively quiet, and we haven't heard much about what is going on behind the scenes. Recently though, in 2015, a teaser trailer finally dropped for what would eventually become System Shock 3. System Shock 3 is being developed by a studio called Other Side Entertainment. And while they don't actually own the IP, as it is owned by Night Dive Studios, who is actually making their own System Shock game as well, they are the studio behind making System Shock 3 and the ones that dropped the trailer and the gameplay we have all seen online. And that brings us to today's video. Because in the past 3 to 5 months, Other Side Entertainment has been going through a lot of rough times. There have been rumors of massive layoffs at the studio, and they have come out and said that the game will be delayed indefinitely due to a lack of funding, and thus they're not able to finish System Shock 3, the game that we're also anticipated for. However, recently this all changed. In one of my newest videos, I talked about the fact that I thought there would be a big publisher to go and pick up the System Shock series, as it was too valuable to just go to the wayside, especially on a game that was already so close to being finished. And while I did get that correct, I didn't guess who it was going to be right. And now, to the horror of many, today we found out that that company is Tencent. Tencent is one of the biggest games publishers in the world, and they own massive shares in different companies you know and games you love like Fortnite, League of Legends, and even PUBG. On top of this, they also own, as you would expect, a lot of Asian property, and this has resulted in them having a huge stranglehold on the industry in not only the East, but also the West. And this has led to a lot of concerned players all over the Western Hemisphere that really Tencent, and by proxy China, is starting to dip their hands too deeply into the games we love, and not only creating issues like more microtransactions and pay-heavy games, but also more deep-rooted issues like censorship and DRM. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Because it seems like this Tencent acquisition, while it will probably result in the game coming out and the team realizing their vision that they originally had, it's those extra caveats that can cause issues not only now but down the line, especially with the precedent that Tencent has really created in buying all of these smaller indie companies as well as bigger ones in the West. And this has been a lot of cause for concern, as a lot in the gaming community are scared of Tencent and the power they are beginning to have over all the different games and franchises we love. What I do want to say though is we need to step back for a bit and actually look at what Tencent has already done in other games that they have acquiesced. Let's take a look at Epic Games, for example. Tencent owns a 40% share in Epic Games and by proxy in Fortnite as well. But Epic has come out as saying that Tencent has honestly led them on a pretty loose leash, meaning they aren't overly bearing on what Epic needs to be doing in terms of Fortnite and the Unreal Engine, and really they try to let the companies have their own say and own creative vision. And we've heard this from multiple different studios as well. While the community outcries at how Tencent is going to ruin the games that the studios are making, a lot of the times it seems like the studios themselves may be making these decisions that we are blaming Tencent for. Tencent isn't forcing League of Legends to be super pay-to-play heavy. That's a decision by Riot as well, just to give an example. But what I do want to say is while this precedent is not already set, the idea that Tencent is gaining too much power and can one day lay down the hammer and wreak havoc is cause for concern. And I think that's where the community's vitriol and hate more so stems from. As we all know, recently China has been a little sketchy when it comes to world politics and gaming especially, and a lot of people are afraid that that sort of sketchiness will carry over into the Tencent brand and thus also carry over into all of these properties that they now own. For System Shock 3, that could mean the game that would have otherwise just been a single player experience will be littered with microtransactions, DRM, and like Valorant, base rootkits that will allow the team to make sure no one is cheating or breaking the game, but at the same token, getting into your computer and potentially stealing vital information that could eventually lead its way back to Tencent, and from there, China. Without going down the road of too much conspiracy theories though, we don't know that Tencent is actually doing anything extremely bad to these companies. And from all the research I've done and others have done, it almost seems like a lot of times these bad things coming out of Tencent-owned games is actually the studios themselves. And that's what I want to talk about with System Shock 3. While it's scary that Tencent now owns a majority share in the company and in theory has full control of what System Shock 3 can and will become, at the end of the day, the track record we have seen seems to point to the fact that Otherworld Studios will get to make the game they want and have already shown off. If they want microtransactions, they will put them in. And if they don't, it can probably come to an understanding with Tencent to not have those there. And at the end of the day, regardless of what studio is buying out System Shock 3 and having their hands in how the game will be made, I think Tencent owning it will not have a huge effect. And the game will still come down to how well crafted of a world and story the team behind System Shock 3 can make now that they have the funding to support themselves. And it is a scary world we live in to think that this big Chinese conglomerate in Tencent may start to control all of these different games that we know and love, including System Shock. But it's important we take a step back and instead of freaking out whenever Tencent acquires a property, we come to a firm and realistic standard on what that actually means. We shouldn't have Tencent buying out all of these companies, as one studio with that much power will always cause an issue, whether or not that's a Chinese company or an American one. And we need more competition in the space. That way, studios like Microsoft can start to buy out System Shock-like games and smaller studios. But in the meantime, I'm still very hopeful for what System Shock 3 is and will become. And with this newfound, likely unending amount of money coming from Tencent, the studio should be able to make whatever type of game they truly want to make and the experience that they have always hoped for. And at the end of the day, it is likely without Tencent stepping up here, we may have never gotten a System Shock 3. And regardless of whether or not this game is good, and whether or not controversies do stem from the likely influence that Tencent will have, no matter how small that is, we should be glad that this game is finally coming, and instead embrace the studio as long as they have not given us a reason not to. If the game releases with crazy amounts of microtransactions, loot boxes, DRM, and everything on the list, then we should be outraged. But in the meantime, we should at least be happy that we're getting an awesome game. But yeah, guys, thanks for listening. This is a newish series I'm trying on the channel of just finding the most interesting gaming media that I've found on Reddit and YouTube, and really just talking about it with you guys, as this is always a series I've wanted to try, and I think there's a lot of things I can do better and learn from, but the more I do it, the better I'll get. And I hope you guys enjoyed my talking about System Shock, Tencent, and really how it relates to the gaming industry as a whole. And I would love to talk about more topics like this with you guys. And let me know down below what you guys want to hear about, what your thoughts are on the video, and what you want to see next. And as always, if you want to discuss topics like this with me live, head on over to twitch.tv/FranklyGaming, where I'll talk with you guys all about this stuff, and I would love to hear your opinions, where I can talk to you on the fly. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you all on the next one.